The space station Eccentricity was a marvel of human engineering, if by marvel you meant a half-broken hunk of metal orbiting a giant cosmic bonfire. The star Gigasol, once the shining heart of this sector, was in its twilight years, expanding like a bloated corpse ready to burst. And yet, amidst the dying light, Captain Vex Longfellow stood on the bridge, trying to look like he had everything under control. "Why are we even doing this?" grumbled Vex, his boot tapping impatiently against the stained metal floor. "We're holding a diplomatic mission for the Xynaxes, and our generator's about as reliable as gambling on a one-eyed raccoon." Wisecracks like that were why Captain Longfellow had his crew's respect, or so he liked to think. The real reason was probably more to do with the fact he hadn't gotten them all killed yet. Probably. His comms officer, a wiry man with permanently furrowed brows named Riggs, shrugged without looking up from his console. Because, as much as I hate to admit it, these perfectionist lizards hold the keys to our survival. They've got tech that could stabilize Gigasol, or at least keep it from swallowing us like a cosmic snack. Great, Vex muttered, running a hand through his hair, which was the color of grease and probably full of it too. So we're relying on a species that thinks a misplaced comma is a capital offense. Remind me, Riggs, why did I take this job again? You lost a bet with the Admiral. Riggs grinned, finally glancing up. You thought you could finish a bottle of that moonshine we found in the cargo bay. Turns out it was actually engine coolant. Vex winced, remembering the 3-day hangover and subsequent reassignment. Right. Good times. The door to the bridge slid open with a reluctant hiss, as if even it was tired of the endless cycle of near disasters. In walked Dr. Zell Urbane, the station's medic and chief pessimist. She was the kind of woman who could find fault in a black hole for being too cheerful. "I've got the latest health reports," she announced, waving a tablet like a herald of doom. "If anyone here still values their life, which, let's be honest, is a shrinking demographic, I'd suggest avoiding the mess hall for the foreseeable future." "What's wrong with the mess hall?" asked Vex, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Zell had a knack for making the mundane sound apocalyptic. "Let's just say the protein cubes have taken on a life of their own," she replied, sliding into a seat. "We could charge for tours if anyone survives." Riggs chuckled. "At least the Xynaxes won't be sampling our cuisine. They're more likely to critique our use of space and symmetry. I've heard they can spot an asymmetrical bolt from orbit, and yet here we are, hoping they'll save us from a supernova." Vex sighed. "Maybe they'll critique Gigasol into behaving." Just then, the intercom crackled to life, spitting static like a cat coughing up a hairball. "Captain, this is Lieutenant Freya in engineering. We've got a situation down here." "Of course we do," Vex replied with the air of a man who'd long given up hope of ever hearing good news. "What's the problem, Freya? You remember that coolant leak we patched last week," she said, her voice cutting through the static. "Vaguely. Why do we have another one?" "Define another one." "More like it's become a traditional festival. The pipes are a waterfall of coolant. It's like Niagara down here, only more toxic and less scenic." Vex pinched the bridge of his nose. "On a scale of 1 to we're all going to die, how serious is it?" "It's a solid 7, could be a 9 if it hits the backup systems," Freya replied, her voice frustratingly calm. "Just what I needed. All right, I'll be down in a minute. Riggs, you've got the bridge. Try not to crash us into the sun or anything." As Vex made his way to engineering, he couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. Humanity, the self-proclaimed smartest species in the galaxy, had built a space station orbiting a dying star, and was now begging a bunch of obsessive-compulsive aliens for help. Maybe, he thought darkly, this was why humans couldn't have nice things. In engineering, chaos reigned. Pipes hissed angrily as coolant sprayed in icy arcs across the room. Freya, a woman with more tattoos than patience, stood in the midst of it all, looking like she was conducting an orchestra of disaster. "Captain," she called, waving him over. "Welcome to the world's worst water park." "Glad to be here," Vex replied, dodging a particularly aggressive jet of coolant. How soon until we're swimming? Oh, we've got at least an hour before things get biblical, she said with a grin. But seriously, we need to fix this before the Xynaxes arrive. I doubt they'll be impressed by our innovative new cooling system. You know, Freya, I almost miss the days when our biggest problem was pirates. At least they just wanted to rob us, not judge us. True, but on the bright side, if the Xynaxes do decide to annihilate us, they'll probably do it with incredible precision. Comforting. Together, they worked to reroute the coolant, joking and cursing in equal measure as they wrestled the rebellious pipes into submission. Sweat and coolant mingled on their clothes, a testament to their bizarre mix of competence and desperation. Back on the bridge, Riggs, Zell, and the rest of the crew monitored the approach of the Xynax's ship, a pristine silver arrow cutting through the black void. It's really unfair how their ships look like art, muttered Zell, running a diagnostic on the station's ventilation system. Our best effort looks like it was designed by a drunk toddler with a grudge against straight lines. Hey, it's got character, Riggs replied, leaning back in his chair. And it's held together this long, which is more than I can say for most things in my life. I'll drink to that, Zell said, though she didn't drink, a decision she often regretted in moments like this. The Xynax's ship docked with the station with the ease of a needle-threading fabric. Vex returned to the bridge just in time to watch the airlock cycle open, revealing their guests. The Xynaxes were tall, elegant creatures, their smooth skin a shimmering blue, like a sapphire under starlight. They wore robes that seemed to flow and ripple of their own accord, all perfectly symmetrical, of course. Vex stepped forward, mustering his most diplomatic smile. "Welcome aboard Eccentricity," he said, hoping his voice didn't betray the chaos lurking just behind him. "I'm Captain Vex Longfellow. We're honored to have you here." The lead Xynax, who seemed to have the perpetual expression of someone smelling something unpleasant, inclined his head. "I am Ambassador Crix. We appreciate your hospitality, Captain Longfellow. Though I must say your station's asymmetry is unique. Thanks, Crix. We aim to stand out," Vex replied, trying not to grimace. Riggs, standing to the side, whispered to Zell, "I'm betting he breaks out the symmetry talk within 5 minutes. You're on," she whispered back, hiding a smirk. "Our ship," continued Crix, "will remain docked until our negotiations are complete. We understand you have need of our stabilizing technology." "Yes, we're hoping it can help with Gigasol," Vex said, waving a hand toward the observation window where the star loomed, an angry, roiling mass of plasma. Crick studied the star with a clinical gaze. "Fascinating. Such a rare phenomenon. We will do what we can to assist." "Great," Vex replied, trying hard not to sound too relieved. "In the meantime, we've prepared quarters for you and your delegation. Feel free to enjoy our facilities." "Thank you," Captain Crick said, though it sounded more like a question than gratitude. As the ambassador and his retinue moved to their quarters, Riggs sidled up to Vex. "Well, that went better than expected. No one died and they didn't insult our taste in decor. Yet," Zell added, always the optimist. The crew returned to their duties, keeping one eye on the Xynaxes and the other on the slow-motion disaster that was Gigasol. As Vex sat in his chair, he allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this diplomatic mission would actually work. Of course, that was before the alarm started blaring and the lights flickered ominously, plunging the station into an alternating game of light and shadow. Vex groaned. "What now? That," Riggs said, checking his console, "would be a power failure on Deck 5. Right near where the Xynaxes are staying." "Damn it," Vex muttered, clenching his fists. "Of course it is. Just once I'd like a day that doesn't end in catastrophe." "Look on the bright side," Zell said. "At least we're consistent." "Oh joy," Vex replied, rising to his feet. "All right, folks, let's get down there before Crix decides he'd rather watch us collapse into a singularity than help." As they hurried through the dimly lit corridors, Vex couldn't help but think that maybe, in the grand scheme of things, humanity's legacy would be summed up in one word. Oops. Vex Longfellow sprinted through the dimly flickering corridors of the Eccentricity, cursing under his breath. He didn't need to look back to know that Riggs and Zell trailed closely behind, each step punctuated by the station's power system's latest rendition of how not to impress your alien guests. As they rounded a corner, Vex glanced back at Riggs. Why is it that every time I try to show off, the station decides to have a stroke? Riggs shrugged, barely winded. Maybe it's got a performance anxiety complex. Doesn't want to be compared to those smooth, shiny Xynex's ships. Zell, ever the cheerleader of doom, snorted. Or maybe it's just sick of us and wants an escape plan. If I were stuck here, I'd sabotage myself too. Vex reached the airlock leading to Deck 5, where the Xynaxes were undoubtedly wondering if they'd accidentally docked at the galaxy's most elaborate haunted house. "All right, chums," Vex said, trying to summon what remained of his charm. "Let's get in there, smile like everything's perfectly under control, and pray these aliens don't notice we're one blip away from a space sitcom." The door slid open with a groan that could only be described as reluctant, revealing a scene that was somehow both better and worse than Vex anticipated. Ambassador Crick stood in the middle of the corridor, a picture of serene distaste amid the chaos. Behind him, the rest of his delegation were crowded together like a band of regal cats who'd just discovered they were somehow in a dog pound. Vex forced a grin that probably looked like he'd just swallowed a lemon. "Ambassador Cricks, I see you found our, atmospheric strobe lighting." The ambassador's gaze could have curdled milk. "Captain Longfellow, is this how humans usually entertain guests?" "Only the special ones," Vex replied, a bead of sweat making a break for it down his temple. "We like to keep things dynamic." Cricks's elegant brow quirked in an expression that screamed not buying it. Dynamic. A curious euphemism for disorganized. "Well," Riggs interjected, his tone as dry as a Martian desert, "we aim to redefine chaos." The Xynaxes behind Cricks conferred among themselves in hushed whispers, their melodic language adding an ironic soundtrack to the flickering lights and the hum of malfunctioning systems. Zell took the opportunity to edge closer to Vex, her voice a low murmur. "On a scale of 1 to let's just implode, how screwed are we?" she asked. "Somewhere around we'll be lucky if they just laugh at us," Vex muttered back before turning his attention fully to Cricks. "If you'll follow me, Ambassador, we'll get you settled elsewhere while we sort out this minor inconvenience." Cricks gave a slow, measured nod, the kind that suggested he was mentally composing a scathing Yelp review. "Very well, Captain. I trust this will not be a recurring issue." "Of course not," Vex lied with the confidence of a salesman pushing used starships. "We pride ourselves on resolving things quickly." "Just not well," Riggs mumbled under his breath, earning a snort from Zell. They led the Xynaxes down the corridor, the station's lighting playing out its own version of an interstellar horror movie. Along the way, Vex made a silent vow to throttle whoever had last inspected the power systems if by some miracle they survived this diplomatic mess. "Tell me, Captain," Cricks began, his voice like silk concealing a blade, "is it common for human technology to be so unpredictable?" Vex considered his answer carefully. There was honesty, and then there was honesty with a dash of not embarrassing himself. "Let's just say humans enjoy a bit of excitement, Ambassador. Keeps us on our toes." "Interesting," Cricks replied, his tone suggesting he found it anything but. "Our species finds symmetry and predictability to be virtues." "Predictability boring," Riggs chipped in. "Where's the fun without a bit of risk?" Besides, without unpredictability, we'd never get the joy of surprise evacuation drills. Cricks's expression could have been chiseled from stone. "We do not share your appreciation for chaos, Lieutenant Riggs. Stability allows for greater scientific advancement." "Ah, but where's the adventure in that?" Zell quipped. "Science is just trial and error with fancier words and more impressive explosions." Vex shot her a glance that said she wasn't helping, but Zell merely shrugged. Perhaps the inevitable diplomatic incident was good for the soul, a cosmic cleansing, if you will. They reached a new set of quarters. Vex palmed the door panel, praying the system would cooperate this time. The door slid open with a faint whoosh that signaled grudging compliance. "Here we are," Vex announced. "A bit more." Stable, Crick swept into the room, his delegation following with the kind of synchronized movement you'd expect from professional dancers or particularly well-trained sheep. "We will require a thorough inspection of these accommodations," Crick said, eyeing the sparse furnishings like they were a crime against aesthetics. "Of course, make yourselves at home," Vex replied. "If there's anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable," Crix cut him off with a raised hand. "There is one matter. We will require a meeting to discuss the terms of our assistance. Given your station's condition, we have certain concerns." Vex nodded, trying to keep the rising dread from showing. "Naturally. Let's arrange something for tomorrow morning. Gives us time to iron out any kinks." As the delegation settled, Vex, Riggs, and Zell retreated into the corridor. The moment the door closed, Vex exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Well," he said, running a hand through his hair, "that was about as smooth as a sandpaper slide." "Could have been worse," Riggs offered. "They didn't storm out or declare interstellar war." "Yet," Zell added, always the optimist. Vex nodded. "All right, let's get back to the bridge and see what other surprises the universe has for us. Maybe today it'll send us a piñata full of good luck instead of a neutron star." With a shared roll of their eyes, the trio headed back through the station's flickering entrails, each step echoing with the knowledge that tomorrow's meeting could decide whether they all got to see another sunrise, or if they'd end up as cosmic roadkill. Back on the bridge, the crew was engaged in what looked like an impromptu betting pool centered around how long it would take for the station to implode. Vex couldn't blame them. Bleak humor was a defense mechanism as old as humanity itself, or at least as old as living next to a dying star with a penchant for temper tantrums. "All right, what's the latest?" Vex asked, leaning against his chair like it might bolt at any moment. Freya, their engineer, looked up from a knot of wires and components that had once been part of the station's main relay. "Good news. I've rerouted the power away from the most volatile sections. Bad news. We've got about as much backup as a leaky rowboat in a black hole." "Fantastic," Vex deadpanned. "Any chance we can make it look deliberate? You know, like part of the rustic charm," Freya snorted. "Only if the Xynaxes are blind and convinced Rust's the latest fashion trend." "You never know," Riggs said, slumping into his chair. "Maybe they'll appreciate the authenticity." Zell shook her head. "Somehow, I doubt they find charm in potential electrocution hazards." Vex rubbed his temples, the dull throb of a headache forming like a storm cloud. "We'll just have to keep things as stable as possible until tomorrow. Once the Xynaxes agree to help, we'll hopefully have a better shot at survival." "Assuming they don't decide to leave us to our fate," Zell pointed out, ever the harbinger of sunshine. "Thanks for the cheery thought, Zell," Vex replied. "I'm sure the universe appreciates your optimism." But Zell just shrugged. "Hey, if we can't laugh about it, we might as well sit in the dark crying." "Speaking of which," Freya said, "I might need to borrow some crew to fix the secondary power grid. I promise I'll return them mostly unscathed." "Do what you need to," Vex said, waving a hand dismissively. "Just make sure the Xynaxes don't get any more reasons to doubt our competence." As Freya departed, Vex watched the flashing lights of the control panels, a reminder of how precarious their situation was. A dying star, a station held together by stubbornness and duct tape, and now, a group of aliens whose trust they'd need to earn if they hoped to avoid becoming a footnote in history. "Well," Riggs said, breaking the silence, "at least things can't get worse, right?" Zell shot him a look. "You had to say it, didn't you?" The station shuddered as if to underline the point, and Vex closed his eyes, mentally cursing whoever had first uttered those fateful words. "Great," he muttered. "Now it's personal." As the crew got back to their work, Vex leaned back, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. In the end, maybe humanity's greatest strength was its ability to keep going, even when the universe seemed hell-bent on throwing everything it had their way. Or maybe they were just too stubborn to know when to quit. Either way, Vex Longfellow wasn't about to back down. Not yet, at least. Not until he saw this through, one way or another. The bridge was a scene straight out of a chaotic artist's fever dream, with crew members darting about like hyperactive electrons around an unstable nucleus. Panic had become the station's unofficial anthem, paired with the shrill notes of the emergency klaxons blaring their discordant symphony. "Well, this is a charming development," Vex groaned as he slammed his hand on the comm panel, which was blinking with an urgency that suggested it was the end of times. "What's gone wrong now?" "Life support's on the fritz," Freya's voice crackled through the speaker, as calm as if she just reported a minor coffee spill. "Oxygen levels are dropping faster than your reputation." "Perfect," Vex muttered, massaging his temples. "Nothing like asphyxiation to really liven up a party. Freya, can you fix it?" "With what, my sheer willpower?" she shot back. "I need at least 3 more hands and a miracle." Riggs appeared by Vex's side, looking like he just swallowed a bitter truth and was determined to keep it down. "Life support failure, huh? Guess we'll see who can hold their breath the longest." "I bet my money's on Zell." Zell popped her head up from behind a console, looking mildly affronted. "I'm already operating on fumes, thank you very much." "Just another day on the Eccentricity," Vex sighed, ignoring the collective snickers of his crew. "All right, Freya, see what you can do with those magic fingers. Everyone else start improvising." "I want ideas, no matter how half-baked." "Ah, improvisation, the cornerstone of every successful catastrophe," Riggs quipped. "What could go wrong?" Vex ignored him and turned to Zell. "Think you could rig something up to keep us breathing until Freya gets things sorted?" Zell shrugged, nonchalance masking a flicker of unease. "Sure, I'll just invent artificial lungs. Should only take a moment." "Fantastic," Vex replied dryly. "I knew we kept you around for a reason." Zell rolled her eyes and got to work, muttering something about unrealistic expectations and catastrophic failures being her 2 favorite things. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew began their own brand of chaotic creativity, pulling parts from one system to jury-rig another. In the midst of the mayhem, Vex couldn't help but marvel at humanity's ability to make miracles out of messes, an art form they'd perfected over centuries of near misses and last-minute saves. And if they failed, well, at least they'd go out with style. Not many could say they'd been murdered by a temperamental space station while hosting alien dignitaries. The lights flickered ominously, as if echoing his thoughts. Vex took a deep breath, savoring the air while it was still available, and turned his attention back to the task at hand. "All right, people, let's see who can win the Nobel Prize for not dying in space. Ideas. Can we open the exterior doors and just breathe in space?" suggested a voice from the back. Vex grinned. "Creative, but I'd like to avoid the whole vacuum of space thing." Another voice piped up. "We could try cycling power from non-essential systems to boost the life support." Freya's voice crackled over the comms again. "Already tried it. At this rate, even my coffee maker's gonna give up." "And that would be the real tragedy," Riggs added somberly, earning a laugh from a few nearby crew members. Vex clapped his hands for silence, thinking. "All right, how about this? We cut power to the exterior lighting and reroute it into life support. Who needs to see outside when we can't breathe?" "Desperate times, desperate measures," Zell said, nodding. "I'll see what I can do." As the crew scrambled to execute Vex's plan, he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Sure, they might be a ragtag bunch of misfits who couldn't keep a station running smoothly if their lives depended on it. But they were his ragtag bunch of misfits, and that counted for something. The lights dimmed further, casting the bridge into a twilight gloom, but the air felt a little fresher, the oppressive weight of potential suffocation lifting slightly. "Freya," Vex barked into the comms, "status update." "Still touch and go," she replied, sounding like she was wrestling with the station's innards. "But it's holding for now. Just don't ask it to do anything fancy like work properly." "Wouldn't dream of it," Vex said with a wry grin. "Keep at it," he turned to Riggs. "What do we know about the Xynaxes? Think they'd be impressed by our survival skills?" Riggs shrugged. "Hard to say. They're big on predictability, remember. Might just see this as another confirmation that we're a bunch of lunatics. Well, if they don't like it, they can always leave, Zell pointed out. Not like we can do much about it from here. Vex chuckled. True, though I'd prefer they stick around long enough to stabilize Gigasol. I'd rather not be flambeed by a star today. Not how I pictured retiring either, Riggs agreed. As they continued working, the station gave another ominous shudder, almost like it was complaining about all the attention. The crew braced themselves, but nothing ominous followed. See, Vex said, trying to sound upbeat. It's just a little temperamental. Like a grouchy old man who forgot his morning coffee, or like a station that's falling apart, Zell added, ever the realist. Details, details, Vex waved her off. We've got this. Riggs chuckled. Sure, boss, whatever keeps you sane. Who said I was sane? Vex shot back, grinning. A sudden chime from the console drew everyone's attention and Vex frowned. Now what? He muttered, leaning over to check the readout. Incoming transmission, the comm officer announced, looking as surprised as the rest of them. Put it through, Vex ordered, settling into his chair. Let's see which brand of bad news this is. The screen flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Crix's serene, if slightly condescending, visage. Vex forced another smile, trying to ignore the headache building behind his eyes. Ambassador Crix, what can I do for you? He asked, his voice an attempt at diplomatic sugarcoating. Captain Longfellow, Crix replied, his tone like an ice sculpture, cold, elegant, and liable to melt under scrutiny. I trust your stations. Temperament has not worsened. Vex stifled a laugh. Oh, just a minor hiccup. Nothing we can't handle. Crix raised a brow, his expression suggesting he believed that about as much as he believed humans could fly unaided. Indeed. My delegation and I are prepared to discuss terms for assisting your station. We feel this situation requires immediate attention. Couldn't agree more, Vex said, nodding earnestly. How about we meet in the conference room in 1IOR? Crix inclined his head, a gesture that seemed less about agreement and more about tolerating the inevitable. Very well, we shall see you shortly. The transmission cut off and Vex let out a long breath. All right, people. We've got an IOR to make this place look less like a disaster zone, and more like a controlled chaos, Riggs suggested. Exactly, Vex replied. Let's show them what human ingenuity looks like when it's backed into a corner. The crew sprang into action with renewed energy, patching up the station's wounds as best they could. It was a far cry from perfect. Hell, it was barely mediocre, but it would have to do. An IOR later, Vex, Riggs, and Zell stood in the station's conference room, the table surrounded by a mix of humans and Xynaxes. Crix sat at the head, his delegation arrayed around him like a group of judges ready to pass sentence. Captain Longfellow, Crix began, his voice as smooth as ever, it is commendable that you have managed to maintain some semblance of order amid such adversity. We aim to impress, Vex replied, trying for levity. Or at least not implode. Crix nodded, though whether in approval or resignation, Vex couldn't tell. Our technology can indeed stabilize the star, but we require assurances that such an investment would not be squandered. Absolutely, Vex assured him. Once we're not in imminent danger of being liquefied, we plan to turn this place into a model of efficiency, or at least less of a hazard. The Xynaxes exchanged glances, their eyes flickering with unreadable emotion. Vex held his breath, hoping their next words wouldn't spell doom for his crew. Finally, Crix nodded, a gesture of agreement that felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Very well, Captain. We will assist in stabilizing Gigasol. Let us hope your station can handle such precision. We'll make sure of it, Vex promised, feeling the weight of the universe lift just a fraction. With the meeting concluded, Vex and his crew made their way back through the station, a sense of cautious optimism in the air. Well, Riggs said, clapping Vex on the back, looks like we might just survive this after all. Don't jinx it, Zell warned. There's still plenty of time for everything to go horribly wrong. Vex chuckled, the sound tinged with relief. Zell, when everything's already a disaster, the only way is up. As they walked, Vex allowed himself a moment of hope. They'd pulled off the impossible before, and with a little bit of luck and a lot of stubbornness, they'd do it again. And if not, well, at least they'd go out fighting, with a grim joke on their lips and a twinkle of defiance in their eyes. The eccentricity shuddered harder than a drunken sailor missing a step. Inside, chaos reigned supreme, a carnival of cursing and clanging as the crew darted about, fixing what could be fixed and muttering darkly about what couldn't. Vex Longfellow rubbed his temples as he stared out the viewport. Gigasol was doing its best impression of a cosmic balloon about to pop. He turned to Riggs, who was perched against a console looking more amused than concerned. "So, Riggs, if we survive this, what's your plan? Start a cult? Write a self-help book on stress management?" Riggs snorted. "Nah, figure I'll just get a tattoo. I survived Gigasol's wrath and all I got was this lousy oxygen tank." Vex chuckled despite himself. "Sounds like a bestseller." Freya's voice crackled over the comms, laced with static and just a hint of panic. "Captain, I've got some good news and some bad news. Good news is, life support's hanging by a thread. Bad news, that thread's fraying faster than a politician's promise. Appreciate the update, Freya. Keep it going with duct tape and sheer willpower if you have to." Riggs leaned over. "Is duct tape still a thing?" "Absolutely. It's the universal constant, unlike the station's sanity," Vex replied, eyes scanning the readouts. Numbers flared in angry red, blinking like Christmas lights designed to induce a migraine. Just then, the comm panel beeped again, announcing a dreaded incoming transmission. Vex sighed, gesturing for the comm officer to patch it through. Ambassador Crix's alien visage filled the screen, looking as serene as ever, like a poker player holding 4 aces. "Captain Longfellow," he began, voice as cutting as a laser scalpel. "Our projections indicate the star's collapse is accelerating. We require immediate evacuation assistance." Vex leaned back, affecting nonchalance. "Seems we're all in the same frying pan, Ambassador. I thought your ships were good for quick getaways." Crix's lip twitched just slightly. "They are. However, we require exact synchronization with our equipment, which has been disrupted by the star's radiation." "Wonderful," Vex said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "So your tech is not as infallible as advertised. Radiation was not accounted for in our initial assessments," Crix replied, his tone suggesting the oversight was more insulting than dangerous. "Well," Riggs chimed in, grinning, "welcome to our world. We call it winging it." Crix blinked slowly like a cat contemplating a mouse. "We request your assistance to recalibrate our systems." "Request, demand, same difference around here," Vex muttered under his breath. "Fine, we'll help. But you'll owe us a drink, or whatever your equivalent is." Crix's expression remained neutral, his eyes flickering like twin ice cubes under the harsh fluorescent lights. "We will await your team." The transmission cut off and Vex rose to his feet, groaning like an old chair. "All right, team. Time to play nice with our perfectionist friends." Zell appeared beside him, her perpetual frown in place. "Guess their flawless plans didn't account for the universe being a chaotic mess." Nope, but we're the experts in that department," Vex replied, cracking his knuckles. "Let's go show them how humans handle a crisis. Badly, but with style." The corridor leading to Deck 5 looked like a battlefield. The walls vibrated with the star's fury, and the air was tangibly tense. Vex, Riggs, and Zell made their way through, dodging crew members and loose wires like an obstacle course designed by a sadist. As they approached the Xynax's enclave, Riggs whispered, "Think they'll blame us for this mess? If they do, I'll show them my patented sorry, not sorry face." Vex replied, trying to maintain a straight line between confidence and lunacy. They entered the Xynax's domain, which was as sterile and precise as the aliens themselves. Ambassador Crix and his delegation stood amid a flurry of whirring gadgets and holographic interfaces. "Captain," Crix greeted, his voice a monotone symphony of vowels that somehow managed to convey disdain and desperation simultaneously. Ambassador, Vex replied, equally flat. Let's get to it. What's the problem? Crix gestured to a console displaying a tangle of fractal patterns. Our systems require realignment. The radiation is distorting our outputs, and we need manual recalibration. Manual, huh? Riggs looked at Vex, eyebrows raised. Guess it's time to show them the art of good all-human improvisation. Zell sighed, moving to the console with the air of someone resigned to inevitable madness. All right, let's see what's what. As she worked, Vex stood by Crix, feeling the ambassador's gaze like a sub-zero breeze. You ever think of installing a more resilient system? Crix's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Our systems are designed for precision. Ah, precision, Riggs mused. Great for making soufflés, not so much for surviving cosmic tantrums. You humans seem to excel in unpredictability, Crix observed, not as a compliment but as a fact akin to observing that water is wet. Part of our charm, Vex replied with a wink. Zell, how's it going? Like knitting with spaghetti, Zell muttered, her fingers dancing over the controls. But I'm getting there good. We need to stabilize the outputs before the whole system goes belly up. After a few tense moments, Zell straightened, wiping her brow. Done. Should hold for now, should. Crix echoed, his skepticism almost visible. Yeah, should, Zell shot back. Welcome to reality. It's as reliable as a gambler's luck. Vex clapped his hands. All right, Ambassador, your tech is back on its feet. Now about that drink, Crix inclined his head, a gesture as close to gratitude as he'd ever show. We are indebted. Just remember that next time we're about to be roasted by a cosmic fireball, Riggs quipped. Noted, Crix replied, his voice a study in emotionless precision. As the humans turned to leave, Vex couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with the Xynaxes. They were both at the mercy of a universe that didn't give a damn about their plans or precision. It was grim, it was dark, but it was reality. Asterisk, 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 back on the bridge, Vex settled into his chair with a grunt. The station was holding barely, and the Xynax's tech seemed stable, at least for now. The crew worked around him, pulling together like a patchwork quilt that was held together by stubbornness and sticky tape. All right, folks, Vex announced, we've bought ourselves some time. Let's keep this heap together until we're out of the woods, or at least until it's someone else's problem, Riggs added, earning a few chuckles from the crew. Zell, standing nearby, folded her arms. Just remember, the universe doesn't care about our deadlines. No, but we do, Vex replied, giving her a grin. And if we're lucky, maybe we'll stick around long enough to laugh about this. Or long enough to drink ourselves into oblivion, Freya's voice crackled over the comms. There's that too, Vex agreed. Everyone keep doing what you're doing. We'll get through this, one catastrophe at a time. As the station lurched beneath him, Vex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They might not be out of the woods yet, but they were making their way through. Step by step, crisis by crisis, with a smirk and a middle finger raised to the stars. And in a universe that seemed hell-bent on crushing them, that was enough. Gigasol was having a tantrum that would make a 2-year-old envious. The massive star was throwing off waves of radiation like it was going out of style, and the Eccentricity was feeling every bit of it. The ship rattled like a tin can in a blender, and Vex Longfellow was trying to keep his breakfast where it belonged. He had a liege roll headache, the kind you only get when the universe decides that today's your day to be the punching bag. Deck 5 was the unofficial triage center, which was a fancy way of saying it was chaos central. Crew members scrambled around, trying to patch leaks, stabilize systems, and not get fried by random bursts of radiation. Vex strode through it all, trying to look like he had a plan when in reality he was making it up as he went along. As usual. All right, team, he shouted, trying to be heard over the noise. Time to rally. We've got Gigasol throwing a hissy fit, and we need to get the hell out of Dodge before we're all crispy critters. Zell Urbane, who was elbow-deep in wires, looked up with the enthusiasm of someone who just chewed on tin foil. Rally, huh? You want us to do the hokey-pokey while we're at it. Vex grinned, though it felt more like a grimace. Hey, if it'll keep the ship together, I'll dance naked on the hull. That's a visual I didn't need. Freya's voice crackled over the comms, the sarcasm clear even through the static. Captain, we've got a problem, just one. Vex asked. I was expecting a whole buffet, life supports hanging by a thread, and the treadmills finally gave up the ghost. Oxygen's dropping faster than a brick in a bathtub. Terrific, Vex muttered. All right, keep breathing shallow. We'll figure something out. Riggs, who'd been busy duct taping something that really should have required actual tools, looked up. So, boss, what's the game plan? Heroic sacrifice. Last-minute miracle, preferably the latter. I'm not big on martyrdom. Smart choice, Riggs said, nodding. Dying dramatically is overrated. Not to mention bad for morale. Speaking of which, Vex continued, any word from our perfectionist pals? Zell snorted as she yanked a particularly stubborn wire free. The Zynaxes are in their usual state of analysis paralysis. They're trying to calculate the precise angle of their doom. Figures, Vex said. Well, we don't have the luxury of waiting. Time to improvise. What's the plan? Riggs asked. Well, first we pray. Then we see if there's anything left to drink. And if that doesn't work, we try something desperate. Sounds about right, Zell said with a wry smile. Let's get to it. As the crew worked like a bunch of caffeinated ants, Vex made his way to the bridge. Ambassador Crix was waiting, his alien features betraying none of the chaos around him. Captain Longfellow, Crix said, his voice as calm as a glacier. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. We must evacuate, really. Hadn't noticed, Vex replied, leaning against the console. But here's the thing, Ambassador. We're kind of all in the same leaky boat. Crix tilted his head slightly, his eyes calculating. Our ships are ready. However, we require your cooperation to ensure the synchronization of our equipment for safe departure. Vex sighed, running a hand through his hair. And what about my crew? What about the people on this station? Crix's silence was answer enough. Vex felt a flicker of rage, but he pushed it down. We don't leave our people behind, Crix. Then you must act quickly, Crix replied, unruffled. The star will not wait, Vex nodded, acknowledging the truth of it. Fine. We'll get everyone we can off this rock, but you better be ready to help. We save who we can, but not at the cost of our own. With that, he turned to the comm panel, fingers flying over the controls. Freya, I need all available ships prepped for evac. Get as many people off as we can. Prioritize the infirm and those with kids. Aye, Captain, Freya's voice came back, crisp and steady. I'll do what I can, good. And Freya, yeah, don't let them see you sweat. Copy that, she replied, even as the station shuddered again. Vex switched channels, calling Riggs and Zell. All right, change of plans. We're doing a full evacuation. Get the people moving and link up with the Zynaxes. On it, Riggs said. I've always wanted to play bumper cars with alien tech. Just don't break anything, Vex warned. Like we've got anything left to break, Zell added. The crew moved with grim efficiency, focusing on the task at hand. Everywhere he looked, Vex saw desperation alongside determination. They were human, damn it, and they wouldn't go down easy. As the evacuation got underway, Vex found himself back in the Zynax's enclave. Crix was coordinating his people with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. Captain, we are ready, Vex nodded. Right. Let's get this circus moving. With the star's light flickering ominously, the evacuation was a mad scramble. The Eccentricity's corridors were filled with people, fear etched into their faces. But there was also hope, a stubborn light that refused to be extinguished. As the shuttles launched, Vex stood on the bridge watching the chaos unfold. Ships streaked into the void, each one carrying precious cargo. They were making it happen against all odds. Captain Freya's voice came through the comms, strained but steady. We're at capacity. If we push any more, we risk losing everything. Vex swallowed hard. He knew the numbers, knew the harsh reality. All right, get those ships clear. We'll buy them as much time as we can, understood. See you on the other side, Captain. As the last of the shuttles departed, Vex felt the weight of those left behind. It was a sickening burden, one he knew he'd carry forever. He turned to Crix, who was still monitoring the exodus with those inscrutable eyes. "This could have gone better," Vex said, his voice raw. Crix looked at him, and for a moment Vex thought he saw a flicker of something, regret maybe. But then it was gone, buried beneath layers of alien calm. "We do what we can with the time we have," Vex nodded, accepting that truth. "Yeah, let's hope it's enough." The Eccentricity shuddered, metal screaming in protest as Gigasol's fury reached a crescendo. Vex knew they had minutes, maybe seconds. He turned back to the viewport, watching the stars as they danced in the void. "All right, folks," he said softly, knowing his words would echo through the empty corridors. "We've done all we can. Now it's up to fate or whatever's listening." The ship groaned one last time, and Vex closed his eyes, feeling the cold embrace of the universe. It was dark, it was grim, and it was real. But in those final moments he found peace. They'd fought, they'd survived, and they'd gone down swinging. And in the end, that was enough. Vex Longfellow had a plan. A terrible, half-baked plan that smelled like desperation and tasted like defeat, but a plan nonetheless. It was the kind of plan you only concoct when you've got nothing left to lose and about 3 minutes to think before everything goes straight to hell. "All right, folks," Vex announced to the ragtag group on Deck 5, "we're going to do something spectacularly stupid. Any objections? Besides the fact that we're all about to become space toast." Zell Urbane chimed in, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she wiped a smudge of grease off her face. "Nah, I'm good." "Great, because we're going to buy ourselves some time by creating a temporary shield using the station's malfunctioning systems." Vex paused, letting that sink in. "Yeah, I know, it's a long shot, but it's this or we get a nice tan courtesy of Gigasol." Riggs looked up from his beloved roll of duct tape, raising an eyebrow. "So we're using the station's power systems, the ones that can't even keep the lights on to make a shield. That's rich." "Think of it as the universe's way of telling us to live a little," Vex replied. "Or not live at all. The choice is yours." Freya's voice crackled over the comms, barely audible above the chaos. "Captain, have I ever told you how much I hate being a guinea pig?" "All the time, Freya. But remember, it's not about dying for the cause. It's about making the other guy die first." "Comforting," she replied dryly. "I'll get the life support systems talking to each other. Maybe they'll play nice for once." "Good, because we're going to need every last bit of cooperation they can muster. We're going to rewire the station's power grid to create a field that might, just maybe, hold off Gigasol's temper tantrum long enough for us to finish the evac." Vex glanced around, seeing the weariness in his crew's eyes, the kind of exhaustion that comes from knowing you're on borrowed time. Yet there was grit there too, a refusal to go out with anything less than a fight. "This is where we embrace the chaos, folks. Use it to our advantage." "Chaos is my middle name," Riggs said with a wry smile, reaching for another strip of duct tape. "Really?" Zell asked, eyebrows raised. "I always thought it was reckless." Vex clapped his hands, trying to summon some energy into the crew. "All right, enough banter. Everyone knows their part. Let's make this miracle happen." With that, the crew dispersed, each heading to their respective stations. It was a flurry of activity, arms waving, voices shouting, the kind of organized chaos only the truly desperate and slightly mad could pull off. On the bridge, Crix watched the proceedings with that alien calm. "Captain Longfellow, are you certain this will work?" "Certain? Hell no," Vex replied, pulling up the schematics on the console. "But it's either this or we start riding our wills, and I don't own anything worth bequeathing." Crix nodded, seemingly satisfied with that answer. "Your species' affinity for risk is intriguing." "Yeah, well, we humans never met a bad idea we didn't like. Now, if you don't mind, I've got a power grid to mangle." Vex dove into the controls, fingers flying over buttons and switches with a determination born of necessity. The station's systems groaned in protest, lights flickering ominously as he rerouted power from non-essential areas. "Freya," he called over the comms, "status report." "Oxygen stabilizing, but it's still thin enough to make a mouse dizzy," Freya replied, her voice laced with tension. I've redirected what I can, but don't ask me to hold my breath. Wouldn't dream of it, Vex said. Zell, how's the reroute going? Zell's voice came back, strained but focused. I've got circuits sparking like it's a bloody fireworks show down here, but I think it'll hold, assuming we don't sneeze on it. Excellent, Vex said. Riggs, you still with us? Still here, Captain, Riggs replied, grunting as he adjusted a particularly stubborn connector. I'm duct taping the crap out of this, so it better work. I'd hate to go out covered in adhesive. Wouldn't be the worst way to go, Vex replied, allowing himself a small chuckle. All right, people, last checks. Let's see if we can pull a rabbit out of this particular hat. With everyone in position, Vex took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. The station shuddered again, a reminder of the ticking clock above them all. Gigasol was close, its radiation relentless and unforgiving. Okay, folks. On my mark, we flip the switch and hope this heap of junk still has a few tricks left. Ready here, Zell confirmed. Systems primed, Freya added. Let's get this show on the road, Riggs said, his voice barely audible over the comms. Vex counted down in his head, each number a heartbeat, a reminder of how fragile everything was. 3, 2, 1, go. He slammed the final sequence into place, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the station lit up, systems roaring to life as power surged through every circuit. The lights flared, the hum of machinery growing into a crescendo. Come on, Vex muttered, watching the readouts. The shield, if it could be called that, flickered to life, a patchwork of electromagnetic fields cobbled together with ingenuity and sheer willpower. Captain, it's holding, Freya reported, incredulous. Don't sound so surprised, Vex replied, grinning despite himself. Never underestimate the power of duct tape and desperation. The shield, such as it was, began to repel the worst of Gigasol's fury, buying the precious time they so desperately needed. It was a temporary reprieve, a stay of execution, but it was enough. Keep it steady, Vex instructed, eyes fixed on the displays. Let's get those last shuttles off while we've got the chance. As the last group of evacuees boarded, Vex felt a strange mix of relief and dread. They were making it, inch by inch, crisis by crisis. But the endgame was still uncertain, the specter of failure ever present. Riggs appeared next to him, wiping sweat off his brow. We might just pull this off, boss. Don't jinx it, Vex replied, though his smile belied the warning. We've still got a long way to go. Zell joined them, looking equally exhausted but triumphant. So, Captain, when this is over, how about we celebrate with something stronger than engine coolant? If we live through this, Zell, I'll buy everyone the finest synthetic booze credits can buy. Deal, she said with a grin. As the last shuttle departed, Vex felt a weight lift off his shoulders. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd managed to give themselves a fighting chance. But Gigasol was still out there, a ticking time bomb in the cosmos, and their temporary shield wouldn't hold forever. Crix approached, his expression inscrutable. Captain Longfellow, your crew has shown remarkable resilience. It is rare to see such spirited defiance. Yeah, well, we're stubborn like that, Vex replied, watching the stars. Now let's hope it pays off. The station continued to shudder, the shield flickering as it absorbed the brunt of Gigasol's wrath. It was a tenuous balance, one mistake away from catastrophe. Vex knew they were living on borrowed time, but they were alive, and that had to count for something. All right, team, he said, reaching for the comms. We've bought ourselves a little breathing room. Let's see how long we can stretch it. Freya's voice came back, laced with both relief and caution. Copy that, Captain. Let's not push our luck more than we have to. No promises, Vex replied, turning to Crix. Ambassador, I hope your ships are ready for what comes next. They are prepared, Crix confirmed, his gaze unwavering. We will coordinate our efforts to ensure all those who can be saved are brought to safety. Good, because this is just the beginning. The real fun's just getting started. With that, Vex returned his focus to the systems, knowing that every moment counted. They'd won a small victory here today, but the war was far from over. As the station creaked and groaned around them, Vex couldn't help but chuckle. In a universe that seemed hell-bent on crushing them, they'd managed to flip the script if only for a moment. "All right, folks," Vex said, his voice rising above the din. "Let's show this universe what a bunch of determined humans can do." It was a rallying cry, one born of necessity and sheer stubbornness, and for now it was enough to keep them going. As the stars flickered outside, Vex felt a glimmer of hope. They were still in the fight, and that was more than he dared hope for. Gigasol's wrath would come again, but for now, they'd bought themselves time. And sometimes, in the vast expanse of space, time was the most precious gift of all. The universe had one hell of a sense of humor, Vex thought, as the Eccentricity's hull vibrated like a cat in a tumble dryer. Of course, he was the cat, and the tumble dryer was a collapsing star about to fry them like breakfast sausages. But hey, at least they weren't out of duct tape or sarcasm. They'd always have that. "Captain, the shield's holding," Freya reported with disbelief that would probably get her slapped by the laws of physics later. "It's actually holding." "Don't sound shocked, Freya," Vex replied, toggling a switch and watching the readouts with the kind of intensity usually reserved for bomb diffusers and people playing poker with their mortgage. "We humans have a knack for pulling victory from the jaws of certain, fiery death." "Or duct tape," Riggs added, not bothering to lift his head from his latest project, an elaborate series of cable ties and adhesive that made the ship's systems look like they were being held together by charity and hope. "Never underestimate the power of sticky-backed genius," Zell chuckled, wiping grease off her face using the one clean spot left on her sleeve. "If this works, we're going to have to erect a statue in honor of duct tape, maybe next to the one for insanity." "More like a shrine," Riggs replied. "It's got more followers on this ship than any deity, for sure." Amidst this organized chaos, Ambassador Crix watched them with an expression that could be described as bemused, if one generously applied a thick layer of alien mystique. His blue skin shimmered under the flickering lights, giving him an ethereal quality that Vex found simultaneously fascinating and irritating. "Captain Longfellow," Crix said, approaching with that unsettling Zynaxian calm, "your methods are unconventional." "A fancy way of saying batshit crazy in your language, I assume," Vex replied, not missing a beat. "But sometimes crazy is what gets the job done." "Indeed," Crix nodded, observing the human crew with what might have been a smile if his features had been arranged less like a Rorschach test. "We Zynaxes pride ourselves on perfection, yet here you are thriving on chaos. It's what we do best. Take garbage, turn it into slightly less offensive-smelling garbage and call it progress," Zell added, fiddling with the comm panel. "Or survival." As if on cue, the ship jolted, and the lights dimmed before roaring back into a brightness that was almost cheerful. For a spacefaring coffin on the verge of becoming cosmic dust, the Eccentricity was holding up rather well. "Status," Vex barked, though the question was mostly rhetorical. He could see the data himself, painted across the monitors like a particularly grim abstract painting. "Shields fluctuating but stable," Freya answered, her voice steady like a rock with a sense of humor. "We've got wiggle room, but don't plan a dance party just yet." Vex nodded, glancing over at Crix. "Ambassador, your ship's ready to play catch with the evacuees." Crix tapped his own device, a smooth, shiny thing that made their tech look like stone tools in comparison. "Ready and waiting, Captain. Your people will be safe under our watch." "Good, because I'd hate to think we went through all this just to have them incinerated by friendly fire," Vex said, deadpan. "Remember, no take-backses." The Zynaxian's head tilted in confusion, a small victory for humanity's legacy of peculiar idioms. But Crix nodded, acknowledging the sentiment if not the exact phrasing. Riggs, having finalized his latest masterpiece of makeshift engineering, leaned back with a self-satisfied sigh. "So, Captain, what's our next trick? Saw a lady in half. Pull a star out of a hat." "I'm fresh out of hats," Vex replied, "but I do have a plan for keeping us alive until the next crisis. Even got a name for it. Don't die yet." A laugh rippled through the crew, a shared moment of levity that did more for morale than any speech could. They were still in the game, and that meant they were still in with a chance. "Right," Vex continued. "We'll keep this patchwork wonder running long enough to get everyone off this death trap. After that, we'll see if we can't outrun Gigasol's worst mood swing yet." "Sounds like a plan," Zell agreed. "If I had a credit for every time we faced certain doom, I'd be able to buy a ship that doesn't shake like a leaf in a hurricane. Or at least one where the bathroom doors lock properly," Riggs added, earning a collective groan of agreement from everyone present. In the midst of this, Crix observed them with that inscrutable expression, his alien gaze taking in every detail. "You humans are adaptive," he said finally, as if the revelation surprised even him. "That's one word for it," Vex replied. "But truth is, we're just stubborn. Too stupid to know when to give up, too clever to die without a fight." Crix nodded, perhaps seeing something in their ragtag band of survivors that resonated with him. "There is much we could learn from your kind. You hear that, folks?" Vex called out, clapping Riggs on the back hard enough to make him stagger. "We're educational. Maybe we'll all get honorary degrees in lunacy." Freya snorted over the comms. "Professor of Survival, Doctor of Desperation." "All right, back to work, people," Vex said. "We've got a universe to disappoint." As they set about their tasks, a kind of weary optimism settled over the crew. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them moving forward. They were underdogs in a game rigged against them, and somehow that was exactly where they felt at home. Zell, elbows deep in wires, shouted across the chaos. "Hey Vex, when we get out of this, you think we'll all get medals?" "Medals are nice," Vex replied, "but I'd settle for not being vaporized." "Lowered expectations," Riggs said with a grin. "The secret to happiness." Meanwhile, Crix seemed to be pondering something profound, or at least profoundly confusing. "Your willingness to embrace imperfection, it intrigues me. We Xynaxes have always strived for flawlessness." "Yeah, how's that working out for you?" Riggs asked, only half joking. Crix looked thoughtful, a rare moment of introspection for a species so embroiled in their own ideals. "Perhaps there is room in perfection for a little chaos." "Welcome to the human condition," Vex said, gesturing around at the organized mess they called home. "We thrive in chaos." "Hell, we practically invented it." The ambassador nodded slowly, the weight of newly considered possibilities evident even to those unfamiliar with Xynaxian expression. "Perhaps there is merit in your approach, in learning to adapt even imperfectly." Vex shrugged, managing a grin. "Stick around, Crix. We'll teach you how to lower your standards." With that, they continued their work, a flurry of activity driven by necessity and the shared goal of survival. For now, that was enough. As the last of the system's whirred to life and the shield continued to hold against Gigasol's onslaught, Vex allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had done it. Against all odds, their crazy, slapdash plan had worked. The Xynaxes, once so certain of their own superiority, found themselves reconsidering their place in the universe. And perhaps, just perhaps, they saw in humanity a reflection of something worth emulating. For Vex and his crew, it was just another day in the endless void, another chance to laugh in the face of oblivion. They were flawed, imperfect, and damn proud of it. As Eccentricity hurtled through space, shielded from the worst of Gigasol's wrath, Vex couldn't help but feel a sense of hope, however fleeting it might be. They had survived the impossible, and that was something, even in a universe determined to prove otherwise. And maybe, just maybe, they'd taught the universe a thing or two about the power of imperfection. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow could worry about itself. The Eccentricity creaked like an old man getting out of bed, but she held together. For now, that was enough. Vex leaned back in his chair, watching the readouts with a mix of relief and disbelief. They'd done it somehow. They defied the odds, the universe, and quite possibly the laws of physics themselves. "Well," Zell said, wiping her hands on her already grease-stained pants, "that was a hell of a ride. Next time maybe we can try something less life-threatening, like juggling chainsaws or befriending black holes." "Where's the fun in that?" Riggs replied, his grin as wide as a cat with a canary. "Besides, I hear black holes are terrible conversationalists. Only if you're talking about your dating life," Zell shot back. Freya, still monitoring the shield's fluctuations, chuckled. "You think Crix will write a glowing report about our ingenuity, or just note that we're too stupid to quit?" "Probably both," Vex said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Xynaxes love their contradictions almost as much as they love their shiny tech." Ambassador Crix chose that moment to glide over, his expression one of curious contemplation. "Captain Longfellow, I must extend my commendations. Your methods, while chaotic, have proven remarkably effective." "High praise from the Blue Man," Riggs quipped. "We'll be expecting our medals any day now." "The Xynax do not typically award medals, but I shall ensure your actions are noted in our records," Crix replied, his voice as smooth as polished glass. "Our people could learn much from your, shall we say, adaptable approach." "Adaptable, chaotic, potato," Vex said, shrugging. "What matters is we live to tell the tale, and maybe have a drink or seven." Crix tilted his head, that inscrutable Xynaxian look back on his face. "Your ability to find humor in dire situations is fascinating. It is an aspect of humanity that we find difficult to comprehend, yet strangely compelling." "That's because we know we're screwed most of the time," Zell said, her tone light. "Might as well laugh about it." In the background, a console spat sparks like it had just heard a particularly bad joke. Riggs wandered over to give it some tender, loving duct tape. "Good thing," he muttered, "because if we didn't laugh, we'd cry. And I'm fresh out of tissues." The ship shuddered again, but it was more of a tired groan than an imminent collapse. The universe had decided to give them a break, albeit a temporary one. And so, the crew of the Eccentricity kept moving, kept joking, kept surviving. "Hey, Vex," Freya called, eyes still locked on her screen. "We've got a transmission coming in from the Xynax home base. Looks like they want to talk. Probably want to know how we managed to pull a miracle out of our collective asses," Riggs said, tightening a bolt for good measure. "Either that or they want the rights to our story. They'll have to fight Hollywood for that," Zell added, flicking a switch that gave a half-hearted beep of compliance. "Think about it, the brainless ones who lived." "Sounds like a bestseller." Vex nodded, aware that despite their bravado there was still a small part of him that couldn't believe they'd made it. "Patch them through, Freya. Let's see what kind of trouble we're in now." The comms crackled to life, a voice as smooth and formal as Crix's, but with that unsettling Xynaxian timbre. "Eccentricity, this is Xynax Command. We wish to extend our gratitude for your assistance in stabilizing Gigasol. Your actions have prevented a significant catastrophe." "Significant catastrophe," Riggs muttered. "More like all of us can now avoid becoming cosmic toast." Vex leaned into the comm panel, channeling his inner diplomat, a skill honed by years of not getting punched in bars. "Glad we could help. We were getting tired of running from one disaster to the next without any reward. Your contribution will not be forgotten," the voice continued, with the kind of sincerity that only diplomats and used hovercar salesmen seem to master. "We hope to continue fostering this interspecies cooperation." Zell snorted. "Interspecies cooperation. Fancy way to say next time try not to bring a son to a gunfight." Crix, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Captain Longfellow, I will ensure that your deeds are recognized. Perhaps this is the start of a new understanding between our peoples. Or a good reason to avoid each other for a bit," Vex said, not unkindly. "We like our chaos, you like your perfection. Sometimes it works, sometimes it explodes in our faces." Freya laughed, a sound that could cut through the tension like a knife. "Either way, it makes for one hell of a story." The transmission ended, leaving the crew to contemplate their narrow escape. The Eccentricity continued its lumbering course through space, a testament to human ingenuity or stupidity, depending on how you spun it. "So what now?" Riggs asked, wiping his hands on a rag that looked like it had seen better days. "We get a vacation or what?" Vex leaned back in his chair, considering. "I'm thinking we aim for somewhere with fewer collapsing stars and more drinks with little umbrellas." Kinda hard to find in this sector, Zell pointed out. But hey, maybe we can settle for a place where the food doesn't taste like recycled oxygen. Low standards, Riggs added, the secret to happiness. Crix approached, his expression one of cautious curiosity. Captain, might I inquire as to your next destination? Somewhere less explode-y, Vex replied, and preferably with breathable air that doesn't threaten to kill us every 5 minutes. An admirable goal, Crix said, his voice tinged with what could almost be humor. I shall take this experience back to my people. There is much we could learn from the human way of embracing uncertainty. Zell laughed, shaking her head. Embracing uncertainty, that's one way to put it. We prefer living by the seat of our pants. Regardless, Crix said, I hope our paths cross again under less dire circumstances. Vex nodded, offering a rare smile. Yeah, Crix, it'd be nice not to have the universe trying to kill us next time. With that, Crix offered a formal nod, the kind that seemed to indicate both respect and farewell. Until next time, Captain Longfellow, may your path be less fraught with unpredictability. The ambassador turned, heading towards where the Zynaxian craft waited, sleek, shiny, and undoubtedly more reliable than the Eccentricity. Vex watched him go, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie toward the blue-skinned alien. They were from different worlds, different philosophies, but there was a mutual respect there that didn't need words. Well, Riggs said, breaking the moment with his usual flair, looks like we didn't get ourselves vaporized. What are the odds? Better than average, Freya replied, finally stepping away from the console. Now let's see if we can't find somewhere to dock this hunk of junk and get a decent meal. The crew, with their usual haphazard unity, set to work plotting their next course. The Eccentricity groaned its displeasure, but it was still alive, still flying. And for them, that was victory enough. Vex looked around at his crew, a ragtag group of survivors who somehow managed to turn disaster into opportunity. They were flawed, irreverent, and occasionally insane, but they were his crew, and that in the end was all that mattered. All right, folks, he said, clapping his hands together. Let's get moving. We've got a universe to annoy and a reputation to uphold. The laughter that followed was genuine, a shared acknowledgement of their peculiar brand of success. As Eccentricity lumbered onward, the stars beyond seemed a little brighter, the void a little less foreboding. For Vex Longfellow and his crew, the journey continued. With duct tape, sarcasm, and a healthy disregard for the odds, they'd face whatever came next, together. And maybe, just maybe, they'd teach the universe a thing or two about the power of imperfection.